The Ayodele mansion stood like a monument on the hills of Ikoyi, quiet, vast, and colder than a marble grave. Inside its opulence lived Morayo, the woman many assumed was the luckiest in Lagos. After all, she was married to Adeolu Ayodele, one of Nigeria's most powerful and wealthiest CEOs. But inside the walls of that estate, Morayo was invisible. Their marriage had lasted many years, yet felt like a life sentence served in silence. She could count on both hands the number of times Adeolu had spoken to her. When he did, it was cold, clipped, and clinical. Not once had he touched her, kissed her, or even offered the courtesy of a proper conversation. Morayo had learned to adapt, waking early, keeping to herself, eating before him, and vanishing into her room whenever he came home. Her room, not their room. In all the years they'd lived together, they'd never shared a bed. She was 25 now, with a degree in economics and fluency in French and Yoruba, but none of that mattered within these walls. She had once been full of light, laughter, and ambition, but all that had been buried beneath the weight of obligation. The marriage was arranged. Her family's small agricultural company had nearly collapsed under debt. The Ayodele patriarch, Adeolu's father, had offered a lifeline, settle the debts and give her father, Baba Tio, a board seat, on one condition: Morayo would marry his son. At the time, she hadn't known the full details. All she knew was that her father looked in the eye with a kind of helpless desperation she would never forget. "It is only marriage," Baba Teo had said. "At least he is a decent man. You'll live in comfort." Comfort. Morayo rose from her bed at 5:45 that morning, as always. The sky outside was still gray, the city below just beginning to stir. She wore a soft yellow wrapper and tied her hair back. The kitchen staff barely noticed her as she moved silently to pour herself a cup of tea and eat a slice of toast. She had 15 minutes before Adeolu would come down at exactly 6:15. That was the unspoken rule. But today, the sound of polished shoes on tile came early. She froze mid-sip, turning toward the stairs as Adeolu descended in a sharp navy blue suit, a silver wristwatch glinting under the chandelier light. He was early, and he was looking straight at her. Morayo. Her name on his lips stunned her. It was the first time in many months he had said it. She stood quickly, clutching her tea like a shield. "Yes, sir. Do you have something suitable to wear to a formal dinner?" Morayo blinked, confused. "Excuse me? I asked if you have a dress appropriate to attend a gala. Corporate function. High level." Her heart started to race. In all these years, he had never asked her to accompany him. Not once. "Why?" "I need to be seen as a family man," he said simply, adjusting the cuffs of his sleeve. "You are my wife, at least on paper." The words sliced through her. On paper. Her fingers tightened around the teacup, but she lifted her chin. "And if I say no?" Adeolu raised an eyebrow, seemingly amused. "That's not an option." "Of course not," she said, her voice bitter. "Like everything else in my life." Adeolu said nothing. For a brief moment, something flickered in his eyes. Regret? But it vanished as quickly as it came. "The event is tomorrow at 7 p.m., he said. "Make yourself presentable." As he turned to leave, Morayo's voice surprised even herself. "What's my favorite color?" He paused. "I beg your pardon?" "My favorite color. Do you know it? Or what I studied in school? Or how I spend my time in this house?" His silence answered her. "I thought so." She stepped past him, holding her head high. "I'll attend your event, Mr. Ayodele, but not because I'm obligated, because I'm curious. Curious to see the world you chose over me." With that, she left him standing alone in the kitchen. That evening, Morayo found herself in her room. No, her prison, staring at the few gowns she owned. She had bought a navy blue one just after graduation, back when she dreamed of working in finance and attending corporate galas as a professional, not as someone's decorative wife. She ironed it carefully and hung it on the wall. Tomorrow would be different. For the first time in many years, she wouldn't be invisible. Downstairs, Adeolu poured himself a glass of scotch. He rarely drank in the mornings, but something in Morayo's voice, her defiance, her pain, lingered in his mind like a stone in his shoe. She had grown into a woman with strength, dignity. He couldn't remember the last time he'd really looked at her. Maybe he never had. He took a long sip. Interesting, he murmured to himself. Very interesting. Morayo stood at the top of the stairs, her hands trembling slightly as she held the black clutch purse. The navy blue gown fit her like it had been waiting for this moment, modest but elegant, the satin material flowing gently around her legs. She had applied light makeup, just enough to bring out her eyes, which seemed more alive tonight than they had in years. Down below, Adeolu Ayodele stood waiting, dressed in a classic black tuxedo. As she descended slowly, the chandelier light caught her silhouette. He looked up, and for the first time in many years, he truly saw her. His eyes paused, just a second too long, enough for Morayo to notice. "You look appropriate," he said flatly. Morayo's lips twitched into the faintest of smiles. She could see he was trying to keep his expression neutral, but something in his posture betrayed him. Still, she said nothing. Let him squirm. The ride to the venue was quiet. As the car cruised toward the Sapphire Grand Hotel, Morayo stared out the tinted windows, Lagos nightlights reflecting like distant fireflies. Her mind buzzed with nerves. This would be the first time the world would see her, not just as Mrs. Ayodele on paper, but in the flesh. "Remember," Adeolu said, breaking the silence, "be polite. Smile. Don't discuss business." Morayo turned to him slowly. "So, I'm just a pretty decoration?" His mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Precisely." She snorted softly and turned back to the window. "We'll see." The ballroom was a constellation of wealth and power. Every guest glistened in diamonds, silk, and ambition. Politicians, investors, CEOs, all orbiting around influence like moths to a flame. When the announcer introduced them, Mr. and Mrs. Ayodele, Morayo felt every eye turn toward her. She straightened her shoulders, took Adelu's arm, and walked in with the poise of a queen. It was intoxicating to be seen. Finally, I get to meet the mysterious Mrs. Ayodele. A tall man with a warm smile approached them. "Richard Omisore," he said, extending his hand. "International investor. Europe, South America. May I?" Morayo nodded, offering her hand. He bent and kissed it lightly. "The pleasure is mine," she said with grace. "Your wife is delightful," Richard said to Adeolu, still smiling at Morayo. "Far more radiant than the media has led us to believe." Morayo blinked. "Media?" She hadn't posed for any pictures. "Do you speak any other languages?" Richard asked, still intrigued. "Yes," she replied. "French and Spanish fluently." His eyes lit up. "Magnifique. I've been searching for someone bilingual to assist with some of my contracts in Latin America." Before Morayo could reply, Adelu's voice cut in, sharp and cold. "Morayo doesn't work." Richard looked mildly surprised. "That's unfortunate. A woman like her is wasted in a house." "I'd love to help," Morayo said, ignoring Adeolu entirely. "Excellent. How about dinner tomorrow? We'll discuss the details." "She's busy," Adeolu said quickly. "I'm not," Morayo interjected, her voice smooth. "I'd be happy to." Richard grinned. "Perfect. 8 p.m. 8 p.m., she confirmed. As Richard walked away, Morayo felt Adelu's hand grip her elbow, firmer than necessary. "What do you think you're doing?" he hissed. "Having a conversation," she replied, pulling her arm free. "You should try it sometime." "You're not having dinner with him." "Why not?" she asked, fire in her voice. "You said, I'm only your wife on paper. And on paper, I can do as I please." Adelu's jaw clenched. His cool was slipping. For the rest of the evening, he didn't leave her side. If Richard so much as glanced their way, Adeolu positioned himself between them, like a lion warding off another predator. It was strange, confusing, and thrilling. On the drive home, the tension was thick. "You're not having dinner with him," Adeolu said again, quieter now. "I am." "Why?" Morayo turned to him. "To remind myself I'm still a person, with a mind, with value, something you forgot." He didn't respond. When they arrived at the mansion, Morayo turned to exit, but paused. "Thank you for tonight." Adeolu looked at her, surprised. It was eye-opening. She didn't wait for a reply. She walked in with her head high, leaving him alone in the driveway. That night, Adeolu Ayodele could not sleep. He sat in his home office, a tumbler of whiskey untouched beside him, replaying every moment of the gala. The way Richard had smiled at Morayo, the way she had laughed, the way she had stood up to him. Him, the great Adeolu Ayodele. What is wrong with me? He had spent years building walls. Coldness was his protection. The marriage had been a contract, nothing more. But somewhere along the line, Morayo had become more than a name on a paper. She had become a presence. And tonight, she had become dangerous. Because now he wanted her. And not just physically. He wanted her to choose him. And that terrified him. Meanwhile, Morayo sat on her bed, holding the navy blue gown in her lap. She had worn it hoping to feel powerful, and she had. But more than that, she had felt alive. Seen. Wanted. By another man. She didn't know if she felt guilty or victorious. Maybe both. She stood, walked to the mirror, and looked at herself. The next morning, Morayo rose before the sun, but something had changed. For the first time in years, she wasn't waking up to survive. She was waking up with purpose. She had an appointment, a choice, and a voice she had finally dared to use. Downstairs in the mansion's modern kitchen, she found her usual corner already occupied. Adeolu was there. He stood by the counter, dressed casually in a white shirt and slacks, sleeves rolled to the elbows. Less EO, more man. A fresh pot of coffee steamed between them. "You're early," she said, surprised. "So are you," he replied. Morayo went to pour herself a cup, aware of his gaze on her. She sipped quietly, waiting for the words she knew were coming. Cancel the dinner with Richard. There it was. She raised an eyebrow. "No." Adeolu set his cup down a little too hard. "Why are you being so difficult?" "Because I can be," she replied. "Because I'm not a piece of furniture in this house. Because I want to know what it's like to be taken seriously." He stepped closer, his voice lower now. "You matter, Morayo." "To whom? To you?" Suddenly, her eyes locked on his, firm and fiery. "After many years of being invisible, you expect me to believe that overnight I become someone worth fighting for?" "I was wrong," Adeolu admitted, exhaling. "I didn't know how to handle you or the marriage." "You didn't want to," she corrected. "You wanted obedience, not a partner." She stepped back, the heat in the air between them undeniable. "I'm with dinner, Adeolu, and if you don't like that, I suggest you learn how to live with it." That evening, Richard Omisore was waiting outside the hotel in Lekki, dressed sharply but with an ease Adeolu never wore. When he saw Morayo in her emerald green dress, his smile widened. "You look breathtaking." "Thank you, Richard," she said warmly, accepting his arm. The restaurants were fine, candlelit and quiet, intimate, but not pushy. As they dined on roasted sea bass and ofada rice reimagined by a Michelin-trained chef, the conversation flowed effortlessly. "Tell me about you," Richard said. "Not your marriage." "You?" Morayo paused and smiled. No one had asked that in so long. "I studied economics at Unilag," she began. "Worked briefly in Abuja before the marriage. I speak French, Spanish, and Yoruba. I wanted to work in international markets, especially trade policy in West Africa." Richard whistled softly. "I knew you were impressive, just not this impressive." "I haven't used any of it in years," she said quietly. "Then it's time," he said. "Come work with me. I'm not offering charity. I need your expertise. And you deserve to build your own legacy." Morayo stared at her glass for a moment, then met his eyes. "It's tempting." "And Adeolu?" "I don't know," she confessed. "He's changing, or pretending to. Either way, I'm not sure if I trust him." Richard nodded slowly. "Just remember, being seen isn't love. Being understood is." Back at the mansion, Adeolu was pacing his office like a caged lion. He had canceled a late meeting just to be home. He had ordered her favorite jollof rice from the place she once mentioned liking years ago. The table was set. But the seat across from him remained empty. Hours passed. The food went cold. The silence mocked him. Finally, he retreated to his bedroom. Alone, the next morning, Morayo found a bouquet of white roses at her door. No card, just a note. To new beginnings. Hey! She didn't smile, but she didn't throw them away either. Over the next few days, something unexpected happened. Adeolu changed. He came down for breakfast. Every day, he listened. He asked about her studies, her opinions. He even made her tea once, though he oversteeped the leaves and spilled sugar on the counter. He was trying, not perfectly, not romantically, but intentionally. And Morayo? She found herself laughing again. Not often, not loudly, but the sound had returned. So had the person who used to make it. One afternoon, he came home early. No warning, no agenda. I thought we could take a walk, he said. In this estate, there's a trail behind the tennis courts. I used to go there to think. Morayo hesitated, then nodded. As they walked beneath tall palms and the rustling of birds, Adeolu cleared his throat. Why Richard? She looked at him sideways. Why not? He's not like me. Exactly. He chuckled softly. Fair enough. After a pause, he asked quietly, Do you like him? Morayo stopped walking. The sun filtered through the leaves, casting shadows across her face. I liked that he saw me, before I had to prove anything, that he wanted to hear my thoughts, not just see my face. Adeolu nodded, hands in his pockets. I envy that. Morayo turned to face him fully. Then stop envying and start seeing. That night, Adeolu couldn't sleep. He had begun something and didn't know how to finish it. For the first time in his adult life, he didn't know how to win. Business was easy. Marriage? That was foreign terrain. But one thing he knew, he couldn't afford to lose Morayo. The rain started just as Morayo was organizing the guest room. She had taken to cleaning small corners of the mansion when she needed to think. It gave her something to control, a contrast to the swirling confusion inside her heart. Adeolu had been softening, surprising her with human moments, small gifts, curious questions, and open silences. But the years of cold attachment couldn't be erased overnight. She needed space, clarity, and trust needed truth. That's when she noticed a folder. It had slipped behind one of the cabinets in Adeolu's office, barely visible unless one was dusting. Out of habit, she reached for it, meaning only to return it to his desk. But the label caught her eye. Peterson-Ayodele Consolidation Agreement. Confidential. Her family name. Morayo paused, then slowly opened the folder. What she read stopped her breath. The first few pages were legal summaries, dry corporate jargon. But as her eyes skimmed through the highlighted clauses, a knot formed in her stomach. Clause 4.1. The successful merger of Peterson Agricultural Ltd. and Ayodele Enterprises Ltd. is contingent upon a marital union between Morayo Peterson and Adeolu Ayodele. The union must be sustained for no fewer than five years. Clause 4.2. Failure to maintain said union may result in reversal of asset transfer and forfeit of 20% Peterson shareholding rights. Clause 5.0. Children. In the event of a child born within the duration of the contract, the merger benefits in transition shall be deemed irreversible. Morayo's knees gave out. She sat on the floor. Her marriage wasn't just arranged, it was engineered. Her existence in the Ayodele mansion wasn't just decorative, it was strategic. Even children were part of the equation. Tears blurred her vision. She flipped to the back and found signatures. Her father's, Adeolu's, and his father's. But hers was absent. Of course. Why would they need her consent? She was just a currency. By the time Adeolu returned home that night, the rain had stopped, but the storm had just begun. He stepped into the foyer and called out, Morayo? She was in his office. Folder in hand. He entered, saw her standing near the desk, her face unreadable. Is everything okay? She turned the folder toward him. Can you explain this? His face drained of color. Morayo, let me... You knew. Her voice cracked, but she steadied it. All this time you knew. I didn't know everything, he began. stepping forward. She stepped back. Don't lie. He stopped. I knew about the merger, about the business benefits, but I didn't know the details. My father, he handled the documents with your family. Morayo's laugh was hollow. Don't insult my intelligence. I swear to you, I didn't know it involved that clause about children or the 5-year stipulation until later. And when you did find out, what did you do? I kept quiet. Morayo closed her eyes. Of course you did. Silence spread between them like oil on water. You've been trying to win me back, make me believe this is real, and all the while I've been part of a contract. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. Her voice rose. Did you ever see me as a person? Or was I just part of your father's negotiation? Adeolu's jaw tightened, but there was no defense to offer. You know what hurts? She whispered, voice breaking. I started to believe you. I started to hope. Morayo. No, she snapped. You don't get to say my name like it means something now. She turned and walked out. That night, Morayo packed a small bag. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she couldn't stay. As she reached the front door, Adeolu appeared again. Soaked from a rain he'd wandered into after she left his office. Please, he said, breath ragged. Don't go. You had many years to care, she said, voice low. But you never saw me until someone else did. I see you now. Too late. She opened the door. Morayo, I love you. She paused, back still turned. Then prove it. Prove that I'm not just a signature on a paper. That I'm not just leverage. And with that, she left. Morayo checked into a modest hotel in Victoria Island under her mother's maiden name. No one could reach her. Not her father, not Adeolu, not even Richard. She turned off her phone and let the silence settle. For the next few days, she slept, walked along the waterfront, and tried to untangle her thoughts. Had any of it been real? She thought about the way Adeolu had looked at her that night at the gala, the way he made her tea, the way his eyes had softened in the garden trail. But how could she trust a man who had started it all on a foundation of deceit? By the 5th day, her stomach had begun to feel strange. She'd been lightheaded, nauseous, sensitive to smells, and oddly emotional. At first, she thought it was stress or grief, but then her calendar app pinged. Period. 6 days late. Her blood ran cold. She went to the nearest pharmacy and bought a pregnancy test. Then 2 more just in case. Back at the hotel, she waited. 5 minutes. Then 10. Positive. 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 She sank onto the bathroom floor, the test trembling in her hand. She was pregnant. She was carrying the child of the man who might have never loved her freely. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Tears of fear, of heartbreak, and something else. Hope. Adeolu Ayodele hadn't stepped into the company's boardroom in days. His usual corner office, glass, marble, the whole monument to Lagos elite, now felt suffocating. It mocked him with the symbols of all he had once thought mattered. Power, control, appearances. But now, he'd give it all away if it meant Morayo would walk back through the mansion doors. He hadn't heard from her since the night she left. He'd tried everything, calls, texts, even reaching out through her younger sister. Silence. And now, he couldn't breathe without wondering where she was, or if she was safe, or if she still loved him at all. Today, he'd do what he should have done from the beginning. He walked into the boardroom like a man going to war. Inside, the Ayodele Enterprises board sat waiting, gray-haired men in crisp suits, the firm's lawyers, and at the head of the table, Chief Tun Ayodele, Adeolu's father, the architect of his empire, and the man who once said, "Emotion is the virus that kills business. I want the Peterson-Ayodele merger dissolved." Adeolu announced, dropping a file onto a mahogany table. The room fell dead silent. "You want to do what?" Chief Tund asked, voice like steel. "Undo the merger. Return full ownership of Peterson Agricultural to the Peterson family. Let them keep the payout. Wipe our hands clean." The CFO blinked. "Sir, that's nearly $12 billion in assets." "I know what it is." Chief Tun stood slowly. "You've lost your mind." "No." Adeolu replied. "I finally found it. You're doing this because of that girl. That girl is my wife, whose marriage was part of a strategic consolidation. Exactly the problem." Adeolu thundered, slamming the folder open. "You buried clauses about children. You turned our wedding into a legal weapon. You used her like currency. We saved her family." Chief Tun fired back. "They were drowning in debt. Your marriage was a lifeline." "No, it was a leash. And now I'm cutting it." The lawyer hesitated. "Technically, the merger can be reversed, but we'd lose control over Peterson's southern farmlands. The logistics contracts in Ogun. Let them go." Chief Tun's voice dropped, low and cold. "And what do you gain, Adeolu?" "Maybe nothing," he said quietly. "Maybe I lose everything." He closed the file. "But for once, it won't be at the cost of someone's dignity." 3 days later, David and Abike Peterson opened their front door to find Adeolu standing there, soaked in rain. Abike's eyes widened. "Adeolu, may I come in?" he asked. Inside their modest living room, the mood was tense. "I know I'm the last person you want to see," Adeolu said, "but I need to make something clear." David crossed his arms. "You tricked us. You made our daughter part a deal and never even looked her in the eye." "I didn't know the extent of the contract until after we married," Adeolu admitted. "But I should have walked away when I found out. I didn't, and I regret that." Abike looked close to tears. "Where is she?" "I don't know," he replied, voice breaking. "She left me, and she's right too." David sighed. "So, why are you here?" "To return everything. Peterson Agricultural. Your board shares. The money." Abike gasped. "What?" "I've already started the legal process. It'll be finalized by the end of the month." "But why?" David asked, stunned. "Why now?" "Because I love your daughter. Because I built my world on her silence, and I can't live another day with that shame." Abike sat, hand covering her mouth. "And I came here to say this. Whether or not she ever comes back, you deserve your freedom, your name, and so does she." He stood. "When you see her, tell her that." Then he walked back into the rain. Meanwhile, Morayo sat by the hotel window, hands resting on her stomach. Her pregnancy still felt surreal, both terrifying and comforting. A part of her wanted to call Adeolu, to scream, to cry, to ask why he never told her the truth. Another part wanted to run even farther. Then her phone pinged. A message from an unfamiliar number. "You're not easy to find, but I heard what he did. He's giving it all back. No strings. Thought you should know. R.O." She stared at the message for a long time. Then she packed her bag. Back at the mansion, the night was quiet. The only light came from Adeolu's office, where he sat reading the dissolution paperwork again. The final signatures would go in the morning. He heard the front door open but didn't look up. Probably the maid. Then he heard her voice. "Adeolu." His head snapped up. She stood in the doorway, wet from rain, makeup gone, eyes tired but beautiful. He stood slowly. "Morayo." They stared at each other. "I heard," she said softly, "what you did." "I had to," he said. "You were never supposed to be a transaction. You deserve better." She nodded, lips trembling. "You're right. I did." He stepped closer, but kept distance. "Why are you here?" he asked, voice rough. She reached into her purse and pulled something out. 3 pregnancy tests. He stared, unblinking. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. Adeolu's knees almost gave out. He reached for her hand. "Are you okay?" "I don't know." He swallowed. "But the baby is real?" She nodded. "I promise you, Morayo, this baby will never feel the coldness you did. I will fight every day to deserve both of you." She looked into his eyes. "Can I believe that?" He didn't say yes. Instead, he said, "I'll spend the rest of my life proving it." 6 months later, the garden behind the Ayodele estate was transformed. White roses arched over a wooden altar. Soft music drifted from a string quartet, and fairy lights glowed gently across the lawn as twilight fell. Friends and family, this time Only those who mattered sat beneath palm trees and soft chairs, watching as Morayo walked down the aisle in a flowing cream dress that glided over her 6-month baby bump. Her hands didn't shake. Her heart didn't race with fear. This wasn't the marriage she had once walked into with questions in her mouth and chains around her heart. This was something new, something chosen. At the altar, Adeolu Ayodele waited in a simple, elegant agbada, white, with gold embroidery on the neckline. No tuxedo, no mask of corporate power. Just a man, her man, waiting. When their eyes met, he smiled. Not the controlled smile of the billionaire CEO. The real one. She reached him, and together they faced the officiant. "We are here today not to form a contract," the officiant began, "but to honor a covenant, not built on obligation, but on trust, growth, and, most of all, grace." Morayo looked at Adeolu. He had changed, not in grand gestures, but in quiet consistencies. He asked her how she was every morning. He cooked with her, walked with her, showed up to prenatal appointments, read every book he could find about fatherhood, and, when she struggled with old doubts, listened without judgment. More than once he had looked at her and said, "Even if you leave, I will never be the man I was." Now, as he took her hands, Adeolu spoke. "Morayo, many years ago, I married you out of convenience. I barely looked at you. I didn't know what love was. But I have learned, day by day, through your strength, your silence, and your truth. You made me see who I could be, not just as a man, but as a husband, and now a father." A few guests wiped away tears. Morayo swallowed, then spoke. "Adeolu, I didn't choose you at first. I was given to you like a solution to a problem. But you gave me back what was stolen, my voice, my pride, my family's name. I forgive you, and I choose you. Today, fully." When they kissed, the guests erupted into applause, laughter, and cheers. And from the back row, someone stood watching quietly, someone unexpected. Later that evening, after the ceremony, as guests danced and the scent of grilled suya floated through the garden, Adeolu's old assistant, Segan, pulled him aside. "Sir," Segan said quietly, "there's someone asking for you. Says he knew you from Oxford." "Name?" "Victor Sanwo." Adeolu froze. Victor Sanwo was an old classmate, and once an enemy. He stepped away from the reception, where Victor stood near the gate in a sharp brown blazer, holding a thin envelope in his hand. "Adeolu," Victor said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Lovely wedding. What do you want?" "I came to deliver a gift," Victor said, tapping the envelope, "though I doubt you'll call it that." He handed it over. Adeolu opened it, and his face changed. Inside were photocopies of an old email thread between Chief Tun Ayodele and Victor Sanwo, dated 8 years ago, before the merger. The messages made one thing clear. Chief Tun hadn't just proposed a marriage and deal with Morayo's family. He had also sabotaged Peterson Agricultural behind the scenes to make them desperate enough to accept it. One line stood out in Victor's email. "Once the debt spirals, David Peterson will have no choice. His daughter will marry your son." Adeolu's hands trembled. "You knew?" he asked, voice dark. "I was in the loop," Victor said, "but I kept the evidence, just in case." "Why now?" "To remind you what kind of family you come from," Victor said, "and what you owe to people like Morayo." He walked away without another word. That night, Adeolu didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of their bed while Morayo rested, one hand resting on her belly, breathing softly. He stared at the ceiling, the documents in his hand. Could he tell her? Would she leave? But then he looked at her and knew, if he didn't tell her, he'd betray everything they had rebuilt. So, in the morning, over quiet coffee, he laid the evidence before her. She read it in silence. Her fingers curled at the edges of the paper. Her breath came shallow. "So, they crushed us first," she whispered, "to make the deal look like rescue." Adeolu nodded, throat tight. "Yes. And your father?" "I confronted him. He denied nothing. What happens now? I've cut all business ties with him. I'm stepping away from Ayodele Enterprises. I'm starting something new, on my own terms." With you. Morayo looked up at him. You told me once love isn't words. It's proof. He nodded. This is proof. Then she did something Adeolu would never forget. She reached across the table, took his hand, and said, "Then let's build something real, from scratch." 1 year later, the sign above the small, sleek glass building in Lekki Phase 1 read, Adeolu and Peterson International Consulting. Inside, Morayo sat at her desk, rocking a bassinet with her foot while typing up a strategy brief for a renewable energy firm in Senegal. Baby Tolu gurgled beside her, blue-eyed like his father, sharp-cheeked like her. Across the room, Adeolu entered in jeans and a tee, carrying 2 coffees. "For the strongest woman I know," he said, setting one beside her. "Ah," she said, smiling, "finally promoted me from appropriate to strongest." He chuckled. "Took me many years, but I'm a fast learner now." She laughed, and this time it was light, true, and whole.